Welcome into Sports Around the Bar, your favorite sports talk show, I'm sure. As always, I am Jake, your bartender, and tonight it's just you and me, kid. We're talking about all of Sunday's action today, as well as Sunday and Monday Night Football. But first, before we go into that, we have to talk about the Colin Kaepernick workout that the NFL has held over the weekend. It was actually yesterday afternoon. Haven't had a chance to talk about it, so I do want to go over that with you too. Got a lot going on today. A lot of weird action in the NFL. A lot of teams showing up. The favorites won more today than we've seen the past couple weeks, so maybe we're starting to see them back on track. We also have a lot to talk about when it comes to these primetime games because we're getting into the point in the year where every game starts to matter. I can't wait to talk about this, especially the Chiefs and Chargers game. Drew won't unfortunately be able to make it with us tonight, but I'm glad you're here, and we'll get right into it. Start with Colin Kaepernick. We have to do it. Again, I'm sure if you haven't heard by now, he's had a workout over the weekend where supposedly 25 of the 32 NFL teams were sending representatives out to meet with him and to watch him perform and see, does this guy actually have what it takes to be an NFL starting quarterback still? Because we've all heard the talk, right? We've all heard people say Kaepernick can't throw anymore, or he wasn't that good of a quarterback. He got benched for Blake Bortles, everything else. All I can say is, after this weekend, where Colin Kaepernick changed the venue because he was unhappy about an NFL waiver he had to sign about some sort of liability release that they wanted him to sign. It just tells me he doesn't really want to be back. Because, again, you're the guy that, yes, you've had your disagreements, you sued the NFL, everything else, you sued your former employer. Going into this, you can't change something like that last minute and expect them to just be fine with it. I mean, they moved the workout about an hour away, an hour and a half before it started. Reasonably, can you ask these teams to move that far to come watch you work out and then be upset when they don't? I heard a lot of talk on it. A lot of people have defended him. A lot of people have said, oh, the NFL should just be done with this guy. At the end of the day, you have to be willing to show that you're going to play ball and work with the NFL. We didn't see that out of him. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this weekend. He said, I want this on my terms. It's going to be what I want it to be. And if you're the NFL that does not have to let him back into it, at what point are you going to go offer this guy millions of dollars to mess up your franchise? Think about it this way. What team makes sense for him to sign with going forward when you're still seeing antics like this being pulled? When you're still seeing this kind of controversy come up? And this is all in the offseason. What happens when something on the field happens? What if Myles Garrett took a swing at him? What are we saying then? This guy breeds all kinds of negative attention around your franchise. And whether you like Colin Kaepernick, whether you disagree with him, or whether you agree with him, it does not matter. As an owner, as a GM, as a team, as a coach, you have to say, I need to do what's best for my franchise. Is that bringing this guy in? I don't think that's the answer. And I think this weekend kind of showed that. We're going to go to a couple comments here, and then I promise we'll get into the Sunday action. Steve says Josh Allen's fire. He had a great day today, but it's Miami. Let's tap the brakes a little bit. Scott says Cap ran a scam on Saturday. Again, I'm not going to go quite as far to say that he was planning this all along and he was trying to screw the NFL and make them look like the bad guys. But I could understand why you'd think that. Again, when you're going to move this an hour away and then give nobody extra notice, how hard would it have been to say, instead of doing this right now, we're going to go do it at 5 o'clock. We're going to give you 3 hours to get there. Hey, I'd like the media to be there. You can show up to this. I'll give you plenty of time to get out there. All of a sudden, you don't look like as much of a bad guy. But when you're talking about that kind of transition that they need to go move to go out and see you, reasonably, do they have the right to, or do they have the ability to do that? I'm going to say no. Scott also says Cap blew any shot of ever getting back in the league after that stunt he pulled. I think you might be right. This might be the end of it. I don't know. And Jacob says he's a bum. Again, no matter what side you want to talk about for the Colin Kaepernick thing, you can't tell me this was a good look. I just don't see anyone saying that this was the right move to get back into the NFL. Sometimes you have to play ball with the NFL regardless of whether you like them or not. And right now he doesn't look like he's willing to do that. I think this might be the final nail in the Colin Kaepernick story that, hey, it was a good run. He had some success when he was with the 49ers. The team was very good. And then, at the end, it kind of slid off the rails and he got replaced by Blaine Gabbert. So story's over in my opinion. Again, I'm just tired of hearing about it. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm going to go through a few more of these comments, and then if we need to, we'll circle back around and talk about it again. But if not, we'll move on. Will says, can we please talk about the inconsistency of the refs? They have been inconsistent all year long, and it's not just one game here, one game there. It's been pretty much just about every crew we've seen come up short, and you're going to have variance every year. I think the NFL has a problem with it. They need to define what is a penalty, what is not, and how is the best way to officiate an NFL game that both keeps things fair, but also keeps things entertaining as well. Steve says Colin is unemployed. He should have had 0 demands. I'm with you. Again, you have to come back and say, you have to at least meet in the middle. If you're going to make these demands, talk about it ahead of time, meet them in the middle. If they say, hey, we want this closed, but we'll distribute this tape and we'll give you a copy of it too, leak the tape. It's not that hard. Leak the tape afterward. And I'm sure part of their privacy thing says you're not going to do it, but hey, leaks happen all the time. Can you prove who did it? No. I mean, we see that happen in sports all the time. He definitely could have got away with that. Will says Colin signs with Miami. I haven't seen that, but I guess we'll see. And Scott says, even Jay-Z called out Kaepernick. Nathan agrees here. I'm with you. At some point, you just need to step up and make something happen. Oh, if you're saying, will Kaepernick sign with Miami? Will, I don't know, man. I just don't know. Again, if you're Miami, you've got a lot of first-round picks. You're trying to rebuild a franchise. Does bringing him in at this point at 32 years old, is that the right move? Or do you need to go with a young guy when you need to rebuild? Because by the time you're good, he's going to be 34, 35, 36. I think we all know Miami's a multi-year reclamation project. They're not going to be good next year with the drop of a hat, in my opinion. I don't know. They need to have a great offseason if they are. Right now, Kaepernick doesn't help Miami either. The teams at the bottom need young guys to come in that are going to coach this franchise up for the next 15 years and kind of play for them for the next 15 years. And the established teams don't need the headache. I don't really see a landing spot, even if he had the best workout we've ever seen out of a guy. It doesn't really make sense from a GM, coach, or owner standpoint, in my opinion. Scott also said the Pats just made the Eagles not a good team because the Pats haven't beaten anyone for real. I think so. Again, watching that game, that was pretty rough. We'll talk about them towards the end because it was an afternoon game, but we will get to that. Also, James says Lamar is the MVP. They were certainly chanting it in that game. I watched enough of it. Again, we've talked about this before, just beating the Dolphins and beating up on the Bengals and beating up on the Houston Texans secondary, which is one of the worst ones in football right now, both due to injury and before that. Does that make him the MVP? We'll talk about it. Again, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm not there yet. I'm really not. He's been spectacular, but you can't just beat up the bad teams, right? I need to see these kind of performances against teams that have great defense. Like if he does this to Buffalo, or he does this to Tennessee, or he does this to anyone with a good defense. Right now, he could do it to the Broncos the way they played today, and I'd be more impressed. But when you're just bullying bad teams, that doesn't necessarily make you the MVP in my book. You got to do it against the great ones, too. The record's good. He's played well in some of those games, but has he been Patrick Mahomes that he goes in to play New England and throws 348 yards? I haven't seen that yet. A couple more. Steve says he likes how we got the Bills and Broncos cans together, seeing how they play them next week. Not on purpose. It's a random order. I have no control over that. All I know is they're both 1 o'clock games. Speaking of which, let's get into it. We'll start with our first 1 o'clock game, which was the Cowboys and the Lions. This game, I'm not going to lie, it was better than I thought it was going to be. I thought the Lions were going to roll over at some point. I said, surely, Jeff Driscoll coming in, playing against this high-powered offense that the Cowboys have. The defense has been banged up here lately. Matt Patricia, eventually these guys are going to quit on him. Has that ever happened? You look at the way they played this game, they battled him all the way into the fourth quarter. I think Jeff Driscoll has been incredibly impressive as a backup quarterback, both here and in Cincinnati. He should be one of the more coveted names when we're talking about backup quarterbacks in the NFL, because even though they didn't win today, on a better team, on a more complete team, Jeff Driscoll might have beat the Cowboys. And that's not a team that's just going to roll over. Couple more here. Will says, uh-oh, Jake, got my wifey watching. All right, glad she's with us. Joseph says, how about good old Captain Kirk leading the comeback today and staying poised? He is making an argument as a top 5 quarterback in the last 6 weeks. It's been a great season. It's what I've been saying about Kirk Cousins forever. If you protect this man, he can make things happen. They have the weapons. They have the running game. The offensive line has played better than we saw them play last year, and all of a sudden, surprise, Kirk Cousins looks like a good quarterback again. I know everyone's going to say they almost lost to the Broncos. They had a terrible start. They're not a winning franchise, and that's why he came back to beat them. But right now, if you look at the way this Vikings team is playing, they can beat anyone in the NFL. Do I make them a favorite? No, I do not. But they can beat any one of even the top teams. They could beat the Patriots. They could beat the Chiefs. They could go beat the Cowboys or the Saints. They could beat the Eagles. They could beat any one of these teams that they matched up in a playoff matchup if they keep Kirk Cousins somewhat protected. Also, Steve says Dallas's defense made this a game closer than it should have been. Again, Jeff Driscoll, I think, had a good game. Even though they couldn't really run the ball very well, he was 15 to 26 for 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. Backup quarterback-wise, that's good numbers. I mean, that was ahead of where Jacoby Brissett was today. I know he had an MCL injury, guys. Relax. Sorry, Colts fans. But he played pretty well today. You have to give him credit. Jeff Driscoll was maybe the best part of the Lions today. Even though the defense stepped up, they played a decent game for a while, kept things close, kept them in it. Still, the Cowboys got the job done and got an important win when we're going to talk about the Eagles losing to the Patriots at the end of the show. So, Cowboys, It's going to be tough to stay ahead of the Eagles when you look at their schedule. The Eagles have a very easy schedule towards the end of the year. They're going to close out with some easy teams. They're one of the easiest ones left in the NFL. This is the kind of win that I talked about beforehand on Friday you need to have and you need to hold if you're going to hold off the Eagles and win this division, because they're still only, a game up? The Eagles, after losing tonight, I'm not going to say they're out of it at all. I think the Cowboys is an important win, but they still have a lot of work to do if they're going to go into the playoffs as the NFC East champion. We'll move on. I'll hit a couple more of these comments and then we'll move on. Lisa says, ref inconsistency. They favor certain teams over others. It's tough being a small market team. That's all I can tell you. And she says she believes the argument could be made that the NFL is becoming fixed sports like WWE or AEW and that they don't let the players just play anymore. I do believe there's a little bit of a bias when it comes to the big teams, especially when you look at the flags coming in, the established quarterbacks. But part of what fixes that is winning. You have to be good enough to overcome the refs. You can't say it's just because my team is who they are that they lost today, especially if we're talking about the Buccaneers. You can't tell me they only lost to the Colts because of one or two bad calls from the refs. Again, it wasn't that lopsided. I think you need to show that you can win, and you start getting the better ref crews. You start getting better games, and all of a sudden, a lot of those phantom penalties dry up against you. I feel your pain. Believe me, my team sucks. The Titans are never a team that's winning 12 games. We had 1 year in 2009 where we did it. You can't blame the refs just because you lose all the time. Yes, there will be calls against you, especially those small market teams that don't have...
Hey, guys!
Hey. See you later. All right. You can't blame the refs. Every time your small market team loses, winning overcomes that. All right. I'm glad we had that little interruption, but that's okay. She was just trying to make an appearance. We'll move on and we'll talk about the Jaguars and the Colts. I think this game shows that the Jaguars with Nick Foles have a little bit of something to build on. Now, I know what you're going to say. What? They got dominated today, but we saw them come out early. They put up an early touchdown. We saw them come back late and put up a late touchdown. I don't think they have the weapons yet to succeed with someone like Nick Foles. I don't think they have the offensive line to succeed with Nick Foles. Kind of like I just said with Kirk Cousins, he's a quarterback that needs to stay in the pocket, needs to be well protected. You work on the run game, you put a few weapons around him, and he can thrive. He's a stand there and throw it kind of guy. I still think Nick Foles switching to him is the right move, even though they lost today. Eventually, you're going to need to play that $80 million man to see if he's worth it. That being said, the Jaguars, they were scared of the Colts. I don't know if you watched that game, but they ran the ball 8 times. When you're a team built like the Jaguars are, you can't go in with Nick Foles and expect him to throw the ball 47 times, even though he put up 300 yards. You can't throw 47 times and expect to win. It just will not happen. I think part of it, too, was them being scared and stepping away from it. They ran the ball 8 times as a team. Not even with Fournette, 8 times as a team. Simply not enough. Good win by the Colts. Came at a cost. They lost Marlon Mack. Jacoby Brissett, I'm sure they're glad he pulled through. He didn't have an amazing game himself, but he pulled through with injury, got back on the field, and let's just say you don't have to worry about losing games like they did last week to the Dolphins. They look like a playoff team, and one that will get there if they keep playing like this. I know the Marlon Mack injury is significant, but Wilkins came in and looked all right. Hines had a couple good runs. Just this whole game was just a tale of 2 different teams. The Colts ran the ball 36 times for 264 yards. They put 3 touchdowns on the board. When you look at the Jaguars running the ball 9 times and putting up 29 yards, it's pretty obvious. One team is ready to move on. One team is ready and committed to win in the trenches, and the other team is Jacksonville. I think the Colts are great going forward. I guess we'll see what happens. A couple more comments, guys. I appreciate it. Keep it coming. Will says the bump Mike Evans had within the 1-yard line on the line of scrimmage is called pass interference. Give him a break. Well, you are allowed to push off and jam receivers at the line of scrimmage. Again, I'm not exactly sure what play you're talking about. I'd have to see it before I'm ready to call it pass interference or not. And then Will also goes on to say the Breeze jump on 4th and 1. Steve says the Jags need a QB. Well, they just paid for one, and they got Gardner Minshew, right? Eventually, you think one of those 2 guys is going to pan out. I don't think they need to draft somebody. I think they just need to build the rest of this offense because they have a running back in Leonard Fournette that might be okay. He's been highly vaunted coming out of LSU, but we haven't really seen the complete season out of him, right? We haven't seen him have a Melvin Gordon-style season where, yes, he's had struggles, but he's going to put together 14, 15, 16 great dominant games on the ground and make something happen. Leonard Fournette, to me, is still a question mark there in that offense. They don't really have studly receivers. I know DJ Chark had another great year, or a great week today. But this is a guy that I think needs to be your number 2 option at best. They need to improve in the wide receiving corps. They need better tight ends. They need better offensive line. They got to fix that offense, and then maybe they can start winning some of these games. Nathan says, if Indy beats the Texans, then yes to the playoffs. It will be a big game for them. I think it's next week. And Steve says Fournette is overrated. I'm beginning to buy that hype. I've heard that a lot, and I've been one of the guys making excuses for him. I've been one of the guys saying Leonard Fournette just hasn't had the offensive line. He hasn't had the guys blocking for him. He can still be a good running back, but sooner or later, I got to see it, right? We're on year 3 now. Eventually, it's got to show up. He's got to make something happen. Maybe it's not in Jacksonville. Maybe he gets the end of this year 4 or the end of his rookie contract. They don't pick up that 5th-year option. He hits the street as a free agent, and he goes somewhere else that can utilize his talents better. But right now, you don't give Leonard Fournette a big contract. They talked about it with Melvin Gordon and Zeke Elliott. He shouldn't even be anywhere near this conversation. If he wants that kind of money, I got to see 16 games of elite performances, or at least 14 or 15 of them, before I'm willing to commit to him. We'll move on. We'll talk about the Bills in Miami, which, kind of like the Lions, this is a close game. This was a game that I think Buffalo had a little bit of a scare in there. Even though they looked good, it was never truly in doubt. You know, they took a lead. The Dolphins kind of caught back up to them. The Bills then pulled out ahead to get the win. It's an important win over a division rival. They wound up 37-20. Again, I think that's a little deceptive. I think the Dolphins had more fight in them than that. But the real story here, Josh Allen throwing for the 3 touchdowns, 256 yards. John Brown looking like a first number 1 wide receiver. My question to you, and what I want you guys to let me know in the comments is, can John Brown have this kind of game in the playoffs against tougher competition than we're going to see in Miami? Because he's a guy that got the big payday from Buffalo. He's the guy that has showed up at times, especially in some of these games where they're not playing great defenses, and has looked good at times. But he's also kind of disappeared too. I still don't think Buffalo's a legit contender, and I know that breaks your heart, Steve, and you feel free to disagree with me. But I think when you look at the Bills, you can't play games like this forever, where you're constantly in these close matchups, because eventually teams like the Dolphins will beat you. I know they've had a great start this year. I know we've seen John Brown play well, and we've seen Josh Allen play well, and the defense has been pretty consistent too. I want to see a dominant performance out of Buffalo before I'm willing to jump on the hype train, before I'm willing to say this team deserves the record that it has, and they're as good as the record shows. What are they, 7-3 now? Before I'm ready to admit that Buffalo is a legitimate contender, I want to see them win 4 quarters in a football game. And I'd like to see him do it against the Dolphins first, but it can be anyone. Name any team out here. I want to see Buffalo dominate a game. I guess we'll wait and see. Steve says garbage time points and yards for Miami. Buffalo did take the lead. They were out in front, and then Miami pulled it a little bit closer. I wouldn't call it garbage time. They pulled it within striking distance, and then the Bills kind of put up some garbage points where they kind of padded that 37 number onto the board. It was a good game, though. I'll give you credit. I think the Bills, those division games always get chippy. At least they won. I know 37-20 sounds like a dominant win, but at least from what I saw, I'm still not impressed with Buffalo. And I know Buffalo fans, it's going to break your heart. They'll probably go to the playoffs, if that makes you feel better. I don't know what they'll do. It'll kind of look like the last time you went with Tyrod Taylor and you played the Jaguars and you lost, 6-3. I just don't see this team succeeding against the Ravens or the Texans, or take your pick, the Colts, the Patriots, any one of these teams that winds up making the playoffs here in the AFC. I think you almost want to circle that Buffalo game and say, how do we play them if we have to play in the first week? Steve, our resident Buffalo fan, says John Brown has been a stud all year long. He's only 180 yards away from 1,000. And again, he's had those big games, Steve. He's had big games where he's putting up huge numbers. Like today, he put up, I got it here in front of me, 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a big day. But I've also seen games where John Brown hasn't been doing that, and Josh Allen struggled to throw the ball. Is it John Brown, or is it Josh Allen, or is it some combination of the both that we're not seeing it week in and week out? I'm just looking for a little more consistency, Steve. He has lived up to the contract they've given him to this point, but again, the best receivers show up in the biggest games in the year, and I just don't know that Buffalo's going to do that. I want to do that to the Patriots when they play him in the second time around. Do that to the Patriots and Tom Brady, and then I'll talk about, wow, what a great investment John Brown has been. He can be a great number 2. He's kind of like DJ Shark, the way I described him. He can be a great number 2 if they find a way to land a huge wide receiver. Like, let's say they get A.J. Green this offseason, and you have him leading the way and soaking up all the attention. John Brown would be a stud at that point. He'd be a great guy to have in your offense. But right now, again, I just don't like him being the number 1 wide receiver, especially for what they paid him. Will says the hate is strong in me. Hey, if you want to bet on the Bills to win the Super Bowl, put that bet down there. I'd like to see it. I just don't see it yet, guys. We'll march on. We'll talk about this Broncos and Vikings game because when I was picking games, I tell you, I was not expecting a heart attack here. I thought the Broncos were going to roll over and die, play dead. Instead, they take a 20-point lead on a 7-3 Vikings team. This to me, again, I almost lost it when I was watching this game. I was like, this is just insane. I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. Then Kirk Cousins happened. They had 4 drives in the second half. 4 of them went for touchdowns, back to back to back to back. It's like the Vikings, everything that could have gone wrong for them did go wrong in the first quarter. They were allowing the Broncos to run the ball on them. They shut that down in the second half, and good things happened. I give them credit. I thought for sure when it was 20-0, we were done, right? The Vikings were going to lose this one. They were going to roll over. Instead, they answered back. They stuck in this game. I think when you look at this Vikings team, that's a contender. That's what I want to see. One that's going to fight back. And I know what you're going to say. The Broncos aren't a great team either. But instead of Buffalo and the way they've played teams like Cincinnati this year, the way they've played teams like the Jets, where they've let these teams kind of hang around, even though the Vikings had a bad stride to start the game, they came back and looked dominant. They came back and looked like a team that could beat anyone on any given Sunday. I said that already. They can beat any one of these teams on the bar right now. They can beat the ones over there by the kegerator. They can beat anyone in the NFL because of that second half that they have. I look at that second half and I say they could do that for a full game when they're hyped up and they're ready to play. I look at the Bills and I say, does that beat what I just saw against Miami? Does that beat the Vikings? Does that beat the Saints? Does that beat the New England Patriots? The answer to me is, I'm not so sure. Ray says the Broncos had one job and they blew it. I know, man. What a game, though, Ray. What a game. You have to admit, that was a classic. Biggest comeback win for the past 5 years when a team's been down 20-0 at halftime. I've seen like a 99-0 in the past 5 years, including the playoffs, when a team's losing by 20. This is a great game. This is a great job and a great mental win by the Vikings because, again, you're down by those 20 points. It's real easy to phone it in. It's real easy to say it wasn't our week and whatever. It can be someone else's job. Instead, everybody showed up. The passing attack stayed ready. The defense buckled down, shut down the run, and the Vikings came back and answered right away. A couple more comments here. Steve says, want to make a beer bet on the Bills-Cowboys Thanksgiving game? Maybe when we get there. I want to see what happens, but I am open to it, Steve. We'll talk about it then. Ray says the Packers can't have a break. Now they got to win against the 49ers. Yes, they can't catch a break, Ray. I agree, man. This is one of those games that, as a division rival, going into it, and you see the Broncos up 20-0, you're like, yes. And then just didn't quite happen for you this week, unfortunately. We'll move on. Let's talk Saints and Buccaneers. I know this is a game Will's been waiting to talk about. This is one of those games that I know the Falcons did it last week. They did it again this week against a division rival. Maybe I was hoping for a little bit something else out of Jameis Winston here, Will. I want to get your thoughts, man. You're the Tampa Bay fan. You're the guy who's been going up to the plate week in and week out for Jameis Winston. Did this week discourage you when you look at his stat line and you look at the way he's played? I know you're complaining about the penalties, but does Jameis Winston going 30 of 51 for 313 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a fumble? Is he still your guy? Is he still the guy that can lead Tampa Bay if they fix some things? Because I look at this kind of game and I'm like, this is what it's always going to be with Winston. And I think the Buccaneers kind of know that. I think the Buccaneers know that it's never going to work out with this guy. They don't have an up-and-comer behind him. Again, Blaine Gabbert, I know, is their third-string quarterback. They have someone else behind him that's really not a threat. They're going to ride out the rest of the year. They're going to get the best draft pick they can, and then the race is going to be on, especially with Tua hurting himself this last week. Into the offseason, you might be talking about thinner quarterback group coming out of college here. My question to you is, do the Buccaneers still have any chance here? Sharif, good to see you, man. He says Tampa Bay needs to move on from Jameis Winston. I've been saying it for a while, man. I've been saying it for a couple of years. I'm 100% with you. I think most football fans can look at Jameis Winston and say it's not going to happen. He's got Chris Godwin. He's got Cameron Brate. He's got Mike Evans. He's got wide receiving options. Yes, he's putting up the yardage, but no, the mistakes are still coming in, even with dominant wide receivers. We said forever it was scheme, right? It couldn't work with Dirk Cotter. It was his scheme, and he wasn't doing the right things to help Jameis Winston. Can we put that to rest now that he's got Bruce Arians and he's still throwing 4 interceptions and fumbling the ball too? I really do think it's just time to get off the Jameis Winston hype train, and I hate that for you. I know he's still on there. He says Winston's our guy, but Will, let me just say, man, I hope that's not the case. I hope they move on, and then you get to tell me how right I was when your quarterback gets better after that. Sean, man, good to see you. I know I didn't say hi to you before, but I'm glad you're in here. Lisa says the Bucs versus the Saints was a joke. This is coming from a Packers fan. A bad call was challenged. Video shows the Bucs were in the right, and the refs called against the Bucs anyway. Not an inconsistency. She would call it cheating. If you're talking about pass interference, and I think there was a pass interference call that didn't get flipped in this one, nobody's flipping them. I think the refs have already said, even though we've said you can challenge it, you have to be guilty of sin. They've had one time this entire season that someone has challenged pass interference, and then it's actually been reversed. So at this point, you're basically wasting a challenge. You're wasting a tight end or a timeout if you're going to challenge pass interference. Beyond that, the Saints, we can talk about them for just a second. They're back to business. They look good again. They did a good job of stifling the Buccaneers in this high-flying offense, and they did a good job of taking the ball away, something that the Buccaneers, even though they haven't been as bad as we've seen Jameis, it's still been an issue for them. I think when you look at the Saints, their biggest problem is still the fact that they only have a couple wide receiving options that Drew Brees likes to go to. You look at the 28 times he threw, 18 of them were to Alvin Kamara or Michael Thomas. He clearly has two options there in the offense that he actually relies on. If you find a way to take those guys away, and that's easy to say, difficult to do, but if you find a way to take those guys away, the Saints are a beatable team. I think the Saints need to add more options this offseason. I know we've already passed the trade deadline. The likelihood of it happening this season is not very good, but if the Saints want to win a Super Bowl and they want to stay a dynasty, I think this year the focus needs to be, can we get Drew Brees another weapon or two? They brought in Jared Cook. Perennial failure for pretty much everywhere around the league. He had a good couple catches in Green Bay. He had a good year in Oakland, but look at every Oakland tight end. That's just the way that they run football out there, and Derek Carr likes throwing to him. The Saints need more options if they're going to be a dynasty, if they're going to be a team that's going to maximize these last few years of Drew Brees' career, because he's 40 now. There's not too many chances left coming up for Drew Brees. This has got to be something that they work on in this offseason. I said it all last week, or all last year in the offseason. This is something that they need to fix and they need to add to if they're going to continue their success. Because again, Michael Thomas, great weapon, great player. Everybody knows that. Alvin Kamara, great weapon, great player. You're going to need some depth to beat the top-level teams consistently in the playoffs. Steve says, can we talk about Kyle Allen? And Sharif says, why? We are going to talk about him. I promise we're going to talk about maybe it's time to go back to Cam, or maybe all this talk about getting rid of Cam Newton might be a little early. Maybe we need to see what the rest of the season holds for this kid before we move on. But first I want to talk about Sam Darnold and the Tank Bowl here. Let's talk about the Jets and them coming back. I mean, even at the bottom rungs of the NFL, there's clearly a hierarchy when you look at the way these two teams played. The Redskins have been abysmal on offense. I know Darius Geis scored today, and that's a great kind of achievement for him. Coming back from injury, he gets in the end zone. That was important for him. This is the first time in, 16 quarters the Redskins have scored an offensive touchdown. This team is historically bad. I just said the Saints don't have any weapons. The Redskins have none. So, again, I think everything we see out of Dwayne Haskins needs to be taken with a grain of salt. He's a guy that I was a little critical of the draft pick. I said, I don't know that I really love this pick by the Redskins. I don't think he's an amazing quarterback. I said Kyler Murray was clearly the number one option, and then you had some distance between him and Haskins. We've seen that. But I'm also the guy saying, don't be too hard on the kid. Same thing I've said about Darnold here in weeks past. Don't be too hard on the kid when you look at what these rosters look like. I'm glad Sam Darnold had 4 touchdowns today. He overcame a touchdown. But, man, it just goes to show you, we know that Sam Darnold can be a great quarterback if they can buff up this offense. And the way we know that is because he's beaten up on these bad teams. He's had success against the bad teams that haven't been able to play defense. We saw him have a good game against the Giants when their defense fizzled out. We saw him have a good game here against the Redskins when they didn't seem interested in playing defense. If they get a good offense around him, I think Sam Darnold can succeed. And even if he can't, you still need to build more to know that. Dwayne Haskins is about as far away from that as we're ever going to get. I think the Redskins, they're going to be a tough team to talk about, especially if the Bengals manage to steal a win like they almost did today, win or two. We might be talking about the Redskins having the first overall pick, because I really don't see a lot of light coming at the end of the tunnel, unless we're talking about that hype train running them over at the end of the year. A couple more comments here. Sharif goes on to say, should the Saints move on from Drew and sign Teddy Bridgewater long term? See, I knew we were going to get into this talk. I knew after last week when the Falcons beat them, especially if they would have struggled today against Tampa Bay, we would have been talking about, is it time for Teddy Bridgewater to come back in and start? Is it time for Drew Brees to move on, or should the Saints move on? I think the answer to your question, Sharif, is how much do you believe in Taysom Hill? And when I say you, how much do the Saints believe in Taysom Hill? Because we've heard a lot of talk about he's the guy of the future. They're working him into creative packages to get him on the field. He's athletic. He can catch the ball. He can run the ball. He can do a lot of interesting things that a lot of quarterbacks can't. If you're going to sign Teddy Bridgewater, I think you're almost giving up on Taysom Hill, because he is not going to want to stick around in that backup capacity forever. I think Taysom Hill has shown enough flash that some of these bottom-tier teams that are looking for quarterbacks would be willing to give him a shot. I think if you sign Teddy Bridgewater, you're moving on from Taysom Hill. I guess it all depends on what you believe. Which one of those guys has the better upside? I'm not a Teddy Bridgewater guy. I'm not a guy that I think Teddy Bridgewater's an amazing quarterback. I think he plays on a good team and managed to get some good wins. Does that make him your long-term starter? I'm going to say no, because rosters don't stick around forever in the NFL. If the Saints defense falls off a little bit or the offensive line gets a little bit worse, I don't know that Teddy Bridgewater's the guy that gets you there. I think he's a great backup. You keep him around as long as you can, but if he's interested in moving on at the season and wants to either start or move on, you got to let him walk at that point. A couple more of these comments, and then we'll move on. We'll keep rolling, but hopefully get out of here before the Sunday Night Football gets too deep into it. Sharif says, Darnold looked good. Yes, he absolutely did. But again, he's looked good against these bad teams if they get a good offense. If they build this offensive lineup and they get him some better receivers and Le'Veon Bell starts to perform again, are we going to see him take it to the next level and do that against higher level defenses? That remains to be seen, but this is a good first step. And take a drink here because, man, I have not shut up, and I appreciate you sticking with me here. It's tougher than it looks. All right, we'll keep moving. Steve says, oh, God, here we go with the Darnold hype train. Yeah, again, you can't tell me a guy throwing 4 touchdowns. You were excited about your team beating up a bad quarterback. Can't the Jets be excited that they beat up a bad defense? Again, hype train, maybe, but I've liked more what I've seen out of Sam Darnold than what I've seen out of Josh Allen consistently because rosters don't stick around forever. If that defense dries up in Buffalo and doesn't play at an elite level that we're seeing, Josh Allen's going to struggle in this league. I really do believe that. He is the kind of quarterback you're going to need to have close to a perfect roster around if you're going to win a Super Bowl. Sorry, again, I'm not trying to come down too hard on the Bills, man. We'll keep going here. A couple more comments. Sharif says the Packers are soft. They're going to get rolled on by the 49ers. I think if the Packers are going to win, they're going to need to find a way to shut down that running game. The 49ers are absolutely committed to it. We'll talk about that more in the future, though. I promise we'll get around to it. Will says he doesn't care. His fantasy football team is killing it this year. I'm glad that's happening for you. Again, our show league, I think we went 0-5, and we're back in it now. We won 5 straight. Not looking good for it this week for us, but hey, maybe we get back into it. All right, keep going. Brian, good to see you, man. He says, no, Bridgewater doesn't feel like the future of the Saints. I'm with you, Brian. I think the Saints, even though if you keep him around as a backup, that's one of the best ones you can have, especially if the roster stays this good. Drew Brees is getting older. My question is, does Taysom Hill step up, and does he warrant being your team's next starter? Is he worth the look? Or have we seen enough out of him in practice that you say, we need to draft somebody? If that's the case, you need to be looking at Jake Fromm in this offseason. You need to be looking at some deeper tier quarterbacks that you can steal with a low-end first-round pick or maybe a second or third-round pick and just keep taking those guys until you hit on it. Because Drew Brees, at 40 years old, let's just say not everyone can be Tom Brady and not everyone can stick around that long. Look at Tom Brady. He doesn't look like Tom Brady. He did not have a good game today. He did not look fresh at all. Eventually, it's going to happen to Drew Brees. And when it does, I don't know that Teddy Bridgewater's the answer. I'm not sure Taysom Hill is either, but I think they're in a better spot than a lot of other teams are in the NFL. And Sharif says, what? Didn't Teddy go 5-0 for the Saints? Replying to Brian's comment before. Yeah, he went 5-0, but this roster's great. You got good play out of a quarterback. That's all you needed. That's not always going to be the case, and I think you need to look at that as a team. If it happened tomorrow and Drew Brees said, I'm retiring, do you sign Teddy Bridgewater? Yes, of course you do. If you've got time to prepare for it, and likely what's going to happen at the end of the season is Teddy Bridgewater's going to say, hey, I'm ready to skip town, I'm ready to go start for somebody. Either you make me your starter or give me the guarantee that I'm going to be your starter or I'm not going to sign a contract with you. You got to let him go, Sharif, because, again, you're not replacing Drew Brees, and he's probably not good enough to win a Super Bowl unless this roster gets even better than it already is. In my opinion, at least. I don't know. 5-0, like you said. Maybe I'm wrong. I think they're still going to need to improve if they're going to beat some of the best teams in the NFC and in the NFL. They're going to have to get better if they're going to go into the Super Bowl and play the Patriots or the Chiefs or the Ravens or maybe even the Texans or the Colts. They're going to have to improve this roster to win with Teddy Bridgewater. A couple more. Guys, I love these comments. Keep them coming. Sean says, Eli Manning has not been doing good this year, but he hasn't been playing, Sean. Remember, he's been on the bench. They put Daniel Jones in. He's been looking a lot better. Again, they've got their guy in New York, and I'm sure they're glad that they moved on. I've been saying it needs to happen. At the very least, it looks like they might have hit on a guy like Daniel Jones. All right. And Steve says, Sam sees ghosts, Josh sees W's. Yeah, with his feet. And the question is, how long till 16 points isn't good enough anymore? And believe me, I'm a Titans fan. I've been going through this. I know exactly what it's like. I've been saying the same thing about Marcus. 16 points isn't good enough every week. I want to see more. And yes, today was 37 against historically one of the worst defenses in NFL history. You don't get to play the Dolphins. You only get to play the Dolphins twice a year. You don't get to play him every week. And if the defense does not stay elite in Buffalo, can Josh Allen win you anything? My question to you, you get to decide. Okay, we'll move on. We'll talk about the Falcons and the Panthers because this game surprised the heck out of me. Honestly, I almost broke it. I didn't swear. I know you're proud of me. I thought the Panthers would have had more fight in this. The Falcons look like a rejuvenated team. I know too little, too late, but man, Matt Ryan looks like old Matt Ryan throwing the ball all over the block. My question to you is, does this hurt the Falcons? Does this hurt them not drafting someone like Chase Young when they get to the draft because they're going to win too many games here? Is it better for them to win? I know Dan Quinn's saying it is because he has the chance to keep his job if they can win some of these games, but is it better for them to win these games long term, or is it better for them to lose? Is tanking the right move here? I want to know, what do you guys think? Should the Falcons consider tanking when we're talking about their season not going the right way? Jeremy, good to see you. I think when you look at this game, the most disappointing thing is Kyle Allen throwing 4 interceptions to let's face it, a bad defense. The Falcons have been an absolute sieve in the back half. They've been absolutely dominated. Kyle Allen, even though people have been talking about him and, he's undefeated as a starter, that's kind of come crashing back down to earth here these past couple games. Even the games that I've watched this guy play, he's had turnover-worthy throws that have been dropped by defenses, or something happens where the defense doesn't come away with the ball. If this guy is going to be a long-term starter for the Panthers, they're going to need to find a way to start limiting some of these mistakes, because I'm seeing 3 and 4 passes out of Kyle Allen every week that are turnover-worthy. He's had some good results. He's put up some good yardage. He's put up some touchdowns in some games, and yes, he's probably not dealing with the best offensive line in football. He's not dealing with the best wide receivers, but they've done a lot to improve it. They've got picks on guys like DJ Moore and Stewart, Curtis Samuel. That's what I was going for. Their other wide receiver, they have spent picks to bring in guys. They've got Christian McCaffrey, who, let's face it, has been absolutely fantastic. He's probably the best offensive weapon in football right now. They have been playing out of their minds to try to support Kyle Allen. I just don't know that this guy is going to be a long-term starter in the league if he keeps throwing these turnover-worthy throws. Eventually, it's not going to be good enough. And I don't know if that means you bring Cam Newton back next year. I don't know if that means you go for another year with Kyle Allen and see what happens, and maybe the kid improves. I think right now they need to be focused on finishing out the rest of the season with him and then making a decision in the offseason, because if he's not the guy, what do you do? Do you go back to Cam? Do you try to draft somebody this late in the draft because they're going to have a low first-round pick? Do you try to sign a different bridge quarterback besides? Is it Andy Dalton? Do you bring Andy Dalton in and say, we'll play ball control and play some defense? Does that solve all your problems? I don't know. The Panthers are in a tough spot, especially after this game, these past couple weeks. Even the Titans, he didn't throw the interceptions. They could have had 4 picks on Kyle Allen when they played him a couple weeks ago. They didn't, because we're the Titans and we don't take the ball away. But Kyle Allen could have turned the ball over a lot. And my question to you is, what do you do if you're the Panthers GM right now? You have... you're just in a bad spot. Every decision you make has the opportunity to be wrong. Every decision you make is the opportunity to be the right one. But, man, I don't know. I really don't. We'll see what they do further on. Good win by the Falcons. Tough loss by the Panthers for a team that's trying to run down a playoff spot. But maybe they can overcome. Like I said last week in the Saints, sometimes you have these games against division rivals that they just get hyped up for them, and it's just not your day. And I think this just was not the Panthers' day. Chris, good to see you, man. He says, how about them Colts? Important win, good physical win. Sucks Marlon Mack broke his hand. I think that's going to be trouble going forward for as much of a run-heavy team as the Colts are, but it was a good win beating a team like Jacksonville. I think they should feel comfortable, especially with Houston losing today, that they can still win this division. I think the Colts have looked pretty good. I think more than anything, I said it before, the Jags were scared of the Colts. That's why they only ran the ball 9 times against them. Meanwhile, Indy ran the ball almost 35. Steve says Christian McCaffrey is literally the only offensive player on Carolina worth keeping around. DJ Moore's been good, man. I don't think that's entirely fair. They've got some wide receivers that aren't terrible. They're not great. They're not world beaters, but DJ Moore has been particularly good in some games. I don't think that's fair to say that it's just Christian McCaffrey. The only thing is they always go to him. So yeah, he's obviously going to steal the show because he's the game plan. He's like option 1, 2, and 3, and then if that doesn't work, check it down to a wide receiver. Usually it goes the other way, but these days they check to wide receivers and give the ball to McCaffrey every chance they can. Steve also says, let McCaffrey start calling the plays. Might as well. Let him throw too. Let's see if the kid's got an arm. Why not? We'll move on. We'll talk about our next game, which is the Ravens and the Texans. This one, absolute massacre. Did anyone else see this coming? I don't know. Maybe some Lamar Jackson fans are going to tell me they did. I think the Houston Texans, we knew their secondary was bad. I didn't think they'd be this bad. Honestly, they were letting the Ravens do everything they wanted. Here's the whole defense, though. You look at the rushing stats, that it wasn't just through the air. The Texans absolutely got manhandled. The Ravens ran the ball 36 times, 263 yards on the ground. Now, 89 of that's coming from Lamar Jackson, so it's not exactly the same. Doesn't matter. You take that out, they got bullied up front by this amazing offensive line the Ravens have. And for the first time, I think I'm willing to say it, I think the Ravens might be the best team in the AFC. I think when you look at the way the Patriots played, when you look at the way even the way they played against Houston, this might be the best team in the AFC. They've already beaten the Chiefs, heads up. It's not just because of Lamar Jackson. It's everybody. This team is dominant. It's physical. The defense has definitely kind of got that second gear now that they've traded for Marcus Peters. They've helped them on the back end. The front end is playing a lot better, too, in the trenches. This has been absolutely fantastic. Sharif says he saw this coming, man, but I don't know. Lamar Jackson looked good today. He did. Absolutely. I don't want to take anything away from it. Again, take that with a grain of salt. He looked good today against a weaker secondary. Kind of like I've been saying all day, I want to see him do it against one of these top-level defenses. I want to see him put up the 4 touchdowns because he's had great results against teams like Cincinnati and teams like Miami and teams like Houston, which is not the defense that they started the year with, and especially now that the secondary's banged up, they have not been playing very well. This is a good result for them, but I'm not ready to crown him the MVP like people are talking about. I'm not ready to say Lamar Jackson got it made. But I think the Baltimore Ravens have found a way to make it work with the talent that he has, and they found a way to maximize that, which I give credit to John Harbaugh for. Not a lot of teams do that. A lot of teams say, we play Ravens football. We're going to do what we want to do. We're going to establish an identity, blah, blah, blah. They have done an amazing job of switching things up and utilizing Lamar Jackson's strengths, letting him run the ball when he needs to, finding ways to get his tight ends open, and then just pounding people over with the running game on top of it. This has been one of the best coaching jobs I've seen in a while. I think John Harbaugh needs to be in the running for Coach of the Year, and I give the Ravens a lot of credit because going into this season, I wasn't sure what it was going to look like. They have found a way to make it work with a guy who still is not the most accurate passer, but has definitely taken steps to improve his game. Sharif says he did remember that me and Andrew Chapman saying that the secondary was the issue, and it was. If you look at the first half of the season, they were absolutely atrocious. They couldn't stop anybody. It seems like trading for Marcus Peters has helped that out a lot. I think one guy with the right attitude coming in can make all the difference. He's a turnover machine. Even though he gets burned, he's the guy that can make that impact play, that can fire up a team. And yes, the secondary can still be an issue, but they've turned it around. And Sharif saying, no, Russell Wilson is the MVP. He certainly has been playing like it. We talked about that in a recent episode. There's been a lot of Lamar Jackson MVP talk, but I still think Russell Wilson's the front runner. All right, is there anything else you want to talk about this game? Do we want to talk about Deshaun Watson just getting absolutely run over? The offensive line that, again, they just spent all those first-round picks, have been bringing Laramie Tunzel, is still obviously not up to snuff. The Ravens dominated this game almost in every facet. And I'm not putting any blame on Watson. Again, there's only so much you can do when you're under this kind of pressure. He, even though he is mobile, is the kind of guy that the Texans are going to have to figure out how to protect, or he's not going to have a long career in the NFL. It's been years now that he's taken hits. Look at Andrew Luck. The reason Andrew Luck is not playing right now is because that offensive line did such a poor job protecting him. I worry that Deshaun Watson's going to be the same guy. I worry that he's going to be that guy that we always talk about all the talent that he could have had and what we could have seen out of Deshaun Watson and what the Texans could have been if only we protected him. Now they've traded away a lot of assets. I think they're in trouble. I think Houston's in trouble for years going forward on getting this offensive line fixed. And I guess we'll see what happens with them too. This is a bad loss, but kind of like I said with the Saints last week, teams have bad weeks. I kind of like what Watson said after the game. He said, flush it, move on. That's exactly what they need to do. We'll see if the Texans can kind of rebound going into next week. Steve says Houston needs an offensive line. One player will not fix that issue. Yes, and that's why you don't give up multiple first-round picks to bring in that one player, even though he is a top 15 offensive line, or left tackle, really, in the NFL. He is a good player. He's not an amazing player. He's not top 5. You can't give up 2 first-round picks when you need 3, 4, 5 guys in that offensive line to turn things around. Totally agree with you there, Steve. We'll talk about Cardinals and 49ers because this game, just like the first time around, stayed relatively competitive, got out of hand, late turnover by the Cardinals, let the 49ers jump up 36-26. But this is a good game. I think the Cardinals, for a 3-7 team, or a 3-7-1 team, have showed a lot of fight. And this is a team that going forward, it's what you want to see in that hard rebuild. It's what we want to see out of Miami when we're talking about them bringing in all these picks. We want to see these kind of strides because they were absolutely abysmal last year. The offensive line is still terrible. They still need more weapons, in my opinion. They still need to improve. It can't be Larry Fitzgerald forever. But we're starting to see some of those new weapons develop. Guys like Christian Kirk, guys like Andy Isabella's look good at times. We're starting to see them bring in younger talent and start to turn things around. Kyler Murray, we're going to be talking about him being a good quarterback if they can build an offensive line around him. After that, it's just building a defense. And easier said than done. I totally understand that. But the Cardinals, I think, are the team that, even though they lost today, I'm most impressed with. Because this, for a team that has one loss and reasonably was a field goal in overtime away from being undefeated, they hung with them twice now, back to back. This team, even though it's in division, I think is one to watch in the future. They are doing the right things in their rebuild. All right, let me read a couple of these comments here. Sharif says, another 49ers-Cardinals classic. Agreed, man. This is turning into one of the better rivalries out west. I didn't think they had him in it, not twice. When they did it the first time, I was like, okay, I think the Cardinals will probably go in here, probably get blown out or just not stay very competitive with the 49ers. But to their credit, man, they were in this game all the way through. Steve says, Arizona is better than their record. I totally agree. They're kind of like Detroit, a team that, despite all these losses, is a couple key plays away from being a much more competitive team. Sometimes that's just adding one guy, adding one playmaker. And it's like I said with the Ravens. Sometimes it's that one guy coming in that turns things around. And the question is, can one offseason, if you make the right moves, is that going to be enough to get them into playoff mode, or are we still another year away from that for the Cardinals? Sean says, he hopes that the New York Yankees bring back Brett Gardner and Encarnacion, Didi Gregorius. He's going down the list. He's saying he's hoping they all come back. I agree. That needs to be, in my opinion, their biggest step forward. You need to bring the bats back because that's what got you this far. Sign the big Garrett Cole get the big Garrett Cole signing as a starter, but we'll talk about that more on Tuesday, Sean. I know you've been wanting to talk baseball. We will get in there. I promise you there. Tuesday's the day for that, Sean. You show up on Tuesday, same time, 6:45 Central, 7:45 Eastern. We'll talk baseball. Will says, how about Drake? He's a beast in Arizona. It's kind of like Adam Gase didn't know how to utilize a whole lot of weapons out there in Miami, huh? He definitely looks better. I absolutely agree with that. And who knows, sometimes guys, they get that scare when they get let go from their team or traded, and they're like, oh, okay, time to step up, time to start playing now. I think Kenyon Drake, maybe it's a little bit of everything. Maybe it's the different system. Maybe it's getting out of Miami. It's a new scenery, and it might be a little bit of that fear of this might be my last chance that's kind of motivating, but Kenyon Drake definitely looks much improved. Where was this guy in Miami? That's what I want to know. Because we heard all the talk about Kenyon Drake being their next running back. Where was this guy in Miami? I'm glad he's showing up and performing for the Cardinals now, though. A couple more here. Steve says, who would have thought Kyler would transition to the pros this well? I don't think it was ever, I never really had a question with his game. It was always a size thing for me. And again, they've done a good job of keeping the hits off of him to this point with as bad as this offensive line has been. Part of that's the mobility, but you're always one bad hit away from him. I just hope he survives the rest of the season because even though he hasn't got hurt yet, I still think size is a concern. I do. And everyone's going to say, it's not enough to stop him from being drafted. Yeah, I agree with that. But you still want to minimize hits on any one of your quarterbacks. It's multiplied several times when we're talking about Kyler Murray being so much smaller than all these other quarterbacks. If a guy Andrew Luck's size can get worn down like that, you better believe a guy like Kyler Murray can get worn down if you let him get hit. All right. As for the 49ers, good win for them. Jimmy G, again, these are the kind of teams you want to see him blow out, but it's in division. I'm willing to give him a little bit more of a pass. I know I didn't give Buffalo a pass, but I'm going to be a hypocrite here. I'm giving the 49ers a little bit of a pass because I've seen them play dominant football. I think this team is still one of the best in football. I don't think it's all hype. I really don't. There was talk about they haven't played anybody, but after we've seen them play the Seahawks, this is one of those teams that has legitimate playoff and Super Bowl hopes, in my opinion. I hope we get to see that keep going. I hope Jimmy G stays healthy, and I'm just glad the 49ers are back because I know a lot of 49ers fans, and man, it has been a rough 4, 5, 6 years for them, pretty much since Jim Harbaugh left. It's been rough for these guys. I'm glad that they've had a little bit of a bounce back here. It's a good win in division. That's all I can say. We'll move on. Not dominant. We'll talk about the Raiders and the Bengals here. The Bengals almost stole one, guys. I thought they were going to. I really did. I thought the Bengals were going to have a chance to pull one off. Couldn't quite get it done. Good job by the Raiders for not choking. I think they did a good job of coming back after the Bengals took an early lead. And then the game kind of fizzled from there. We didn't see a whole lot of scoring in the second half. I think it went into halftime 17-10, and then both teams kind of locked it down. Nobody really could get ahead of each other. Both of these teams, in my opinion, even though the Raiders are in the playoff hunt, I don't know that they get there. It's an ugly win that you need to pull off, but again, when we're talking about playing playoff caliber teams, What do you guys think? Do you think this is one bad week? Because I'm a little bit on the fence here. Oakland, we've seen them play well against the Colts. We've seen them show up in some big games here. Do you think Oakland has been one of those teams that this is a blip on the radar and this is them not showing up? Or do you think Oakland has is the shoe on the other foot? Has Oakland fallen short in games like this where we should have seen them play better but also beat them? And Steve says that's BS. Why give them a pass? He turned it over 3 times. Yes, I get it. Not a great game by him, but they won the game as well. It was in division. And the reason I'm giving them a pass, Steve, is exactly what I was just talking about. The reason I'm giving the 49ers a pass is because I've seen them play like an elite team at times. I have not seen Buffalo play like an elite team, except what? Against Miami? The Bengals have hung with them. They didn't blow out the Jets. This has been a team that has just let teams hang around them, let teams kind of stay in these games. That doesn't work when you're playing good teams. The 49ers, we've seen them murder people. We've seen them come out and run the ball with authority. We've seen them come out and throw the ball when they need to with authority. I haven't never watched the Bills this point come into a game and just steamroll somebody on every facet of the ball. I've seen the defense play well. I've seen Josh Allen play well with his legs at times. I've seen Josh Allen throw the ball okay at times, but rarely has it been in one of these situations that I'm looking at it and I'm saying, man, you know what? This team could go on to beat somebody. That's why they don't get the pass. I'm still not sold on Buffalo, man, and I hate it for you. Again, I'm not trying to be mean, man. I know they're your team, but I just don't see that. I don't see them going anywhere near. They're not as good of a team as the 49ers. If they played 1,000 times right now, back to back, the 49ers probably win 700-800 of those, and that's in the NFL where everything's so close. Martavis, good to see you. He says he knows a few Bronco fans that are upset, and he didn't use the word upset, but I'm with you, man. That's a tough way to lose, especially up 20. They almost came back. It was almost great. The one thing I didn't love about that game, and I watched the end of it, was they were calling for fouls all the time. After every pass play, they were calling for fouls. I watched especially the last one where Noah Fant just absolutely murdered a cornerback, shoving off on him, didn't catch the ball, and then looked to the ref like, how are you not going to throw a flag on that? They did what they had to do to try to win the game. I'm still not crazy about the way they went about it, but the Broncos, to me, it's a tough, tough loss. I still wish they would have. I don't know. Again, the Vikings, they definitely could have taken advantage of the Vikings getting up 20-0 on them, but the better team won here today. The better team played the better half and won this game. If they wanted to win, all you have to do is stop Kirk Cousins on one of those second half drives, and they had the chance to do that. Steve goes on to say Oakland had a bad week. You could be right. Again, this has been one of the most perplexing teams for me to watch this week. I didn't think they'd be very good going into the season. Then they kind of impressed me with some of these wins, and then they've had some games where they haven't impressed me as much. I think they're just a team in the middle, and you can win like that. It's still a building process for Oakland, right? Let's not forget, last year they were absolutely terrible. Even under Gruden. There were people like, man, we're stuck with this for 10 years. They have shown signs of improvement, and that's what you want to see. If nothing else, I think it's a step in the right direction for them. All right, guys, I appreciate you sticking with me for this long. We'll move into our last game and then get on to Sunday, Monday Night Football. Let's talk about the Ravens and the Patriots, which turned into a low-scoring game, 17-10. I think this was the game that surprised me most. I thought for sure this would wind up high-scoring. For a second, the Eagles, they looked good. They were up 10-0. I thought they were going to be able to pull one out against the Patriots. And then it's like the offense shut off, man. The Patriots just woke up. They shut that Eagles offense down. And I really think, even though the Patriots walked away with the win here, I wasn't overly impressed with the way they played. They couldn't throw the ball against a secondary that's been absolutely just letting people dominate them game in and game out, and yet Tom Brady did not look sharp. And it wasn't just, oh, they're making mistakes or guys are dropping passes. It wasn't anything like that. It's just they didn't look good. The Eagles played better in defense than I've seen them play, but watching Tom Brady play, it's like he looks 42. And that, to me, is the biggest concern, that even coming off of a bye, you watch the Patriots, the way they played today, I was like, man, that was a little ugly. Like, if they play like that against the Chiefs, they're not going to beat them. Or they play like that against even the Ravens, they're not going to beat these teams in the AFC. They need, I don't know, what's the right answer for the Patriots? Is it just the wide receiving core has been decimated? Because now they got Sanu and they still have Edelman, but they've lost guys like Josh Gordon. They've lost Antonio Brown out of that group. They are not an elite unit receiving the ball. They've got some good running backs, but that can only last so long. We saw Philadelphia show that if you play aggressively, you can limit the running back some. I don't know. I look at this game and Patriots, they're not the team we were talking about a couple weeks ago that everyone's saying this is one of the best defenses out there and, this might be one of the best iterations of the Patriots we've ever seen. They look beatable today. They did. And I know they got the win, and sometimes that's what it's about in the NFL is getting those ugly wins. They looked 100% beatable, though. Oh, okay. Sean says, I'm so right, and Lamar needs to do better. Jake, where is Drew? He's out working tonight, so he couldn't join us today. And I'm glad you'll be back Tuesday as well. Brian says the Pats pulled off that W. Yeah, I mean, I was surprised, Brian. I'm not going to lie to you. That, to me, when they went down 10-0, I was like, is this... I thought I picked wrong, and I thought Drew was going to catch up to me in the standings. Instead, Patriots defense locks them down, and now we're talking about the Patriots still only having one loss, still cruising their way to an AFC champion, or to the AFC playoffs with the bye week. This is what they need for a 42-year-old quarterback, because the last thing they need is to go have back-to-back tough, strenuous games against teams that can go and hit the quarterback. Like if they play the Bills and the Ravens, they need to lock down this first round bye if they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. I think Tom Brady may play till he's 45. He may not, but right now he looks every bit of 42. We need to see some improvement out of TB12 if they're going to... I don't know. It's still hard to bet against him. I still don't even want to say this, but TB12 did not look like he was winning a Super Bowl the way he played today. A couple more here. Ray says Nick Foles needs to get back to Philadelphia and they need to trade Carson Wentz. He hates to say it. So you think they kept the wrong guy out there in Philly? That's interesting. I'm not so sure. I know for a fact they would like to hang on to him, but again, Carson Wentz is still a much younger quarterback, a guy that I think from any GM kind of viewpoint, you have to keep him over a guy that's been a journeyman quarterback like Nick Foles. I don't know, Ray. It's a tough call, man, and it always has been. I know he didn't look good today for the Jaguars. Maybe if he was there, things would be different. But, maybe it's always hard to predict here, even in sports talk. Will says, let's take a poll. Does anybody give a rat's ass about the Patriots? The survey says nobody. I think everybody cares about them because everybody wants to beat them. Ray says Bill Belichick won that game, not Tom Brady. I 100% agree with that. The defense stepped up. I mean, when they were down 10-0, they locked it down from there on out. Steve says New England will not play in the AFC title game. Well, if they get the first round bye, you only have to beat one team at home in the playoffs to get there. That's a bold prediction. Who upsets them then? That's my question to you, Steve. Who upsets them? Lisa says Tom Brady is overrated and needs to go. I don't think he's overrated. I think we just remember how good he used to be, and we're thinking we're still getting the same guy at 42 that we got at 35. And I think games like today are showing you Tom Brady is not the same guy. They need to do everything they can to keep him as rested and as protected as humanly possible. Bubble wrap this guy and bubble wrap this arm and see if he can make it to another Super Bowl. And Will says he's sick and tired of hearing about him. But again, until they beat him, until somebody beats them, we're going to be talking about the Patriots. They're 8-1 right now, 9-1. Look, I want someone else to win the Super Bowl too, for the simple fact that I got Patriots fatigue. But as long as they're winning, we're going to keep talking about them. That's all I can say. As for the Eagles, this would have been a great one to steal, especially with the way Detroit kind of hung with the Cowboys. They've got an easy schedule coming up. They need to take advantage if they're going to beat the Cowboys out. It's going to be a great race in the NFC East, which I'm glad to see. It seems like this division always churns out at least two teams that are competing going into the end of the season. They're still a team to beat. This is not a bad loss for them. I don't think many people gave them a whole lot of chance to win today, even though they've kind of been good at times and bad at times this season. I think this is one you just write off as it was the Patriots and we gave it a good shot. I think the Eagles will come back, and I'm not ready to write them off yet. I don't think this is a bad loss. I think the Eagles, even though they're now behind the Cowboys in division, might even be my favorite to win it at this point when you look at the way they played today. We'll move on. Let's talk Sunday here. Let's talk about the game going on right now. That again, I haven't watched any of it, but we've got the Bears and the Rams. The simple fact is I cannot bet on the Bears to win this game. They have let me down too many times. I'm going to bet that even though the Rams' offensive line has been god-awful this season, that they're going to have enough to hold off the Bears. Hopefully they do some creative stuff so Jared Goff doesn't get run over and killed. But they need to find a way to limit this Bears defensive front. The question is, do the Bears defensive front even want to play this game? I think we've seen them take a step back, not because they're missing a whole lot of guys or they're not as talented as they were last year, but because the mentality's gone. It seems like they don't have that killer instinct, and you could say it's because the offense isn't performing or Matt Nagy lost the locker room, but they don't look like the Bears from last year. And I think as long as that's the case, the Bears are going to lose this game. If they're going to win, it's got to be a dominant performance by guys like Khalil Mack up front, just steamrolling this offensive line that's been absolutely atrocious. That's going to be the matchup to watch here. I think defensively, the Rams should have no problem shutting down the Bears. Everybody's done it, right? So I think they should be okay on defense. The real question is, can Mitch Trubisky play a conservative game, not turn the ball over, and hope his defense hangs him around in this, keeps him hanging around in this one so that maybe the Bears can pull it off? My guess is no, but the answer could be yes. I just can't bet on the Bears. They've let me down too many times. I picked them to go 12-4 this season. they're not going 12-4. I think we all can recognize that. I think also the season's over when the Bears lose this one. I think we'll see the locker room absolutely spiral out of control, and then they'll have the decision to make, is it time to keep or get rid of Mitch Trubisky? Will says his wife makes killer sandwiches. Deal with it. And I am jealous, man. I could go for one here. Hopefully I'll get one after the show. Whew. And Steve also said Buffalo, Baltimore, Houston, or Kansas City could beat the Patriots on any given week, man. Yes, but I don't know. It's tough to say. Going into Foxborough, KC's looked beatable this year. Houston looked beatable today. Baltimore, I'll give you. Buffalo, I don't know, man. I know they battled hard the first time, but still, I just don't see them beating up. Both of these teams have struggled on offense. Who am I going to go with? You got to go with the Patriots. You look at the way Tom Brady has owned the Bills in the past. I think he's my favorite to beat him. So maybe Baltimore can beat him. Maybe right now I'm taking Baltimore to beat him. Beyond that, maybe Kansas City too, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Let's talk about that game. Let's talk about Monday night and the Chiefs going to Mexico City to play the Chargers. It's unfortunate for the Chargers. They have to play this one as a home game, but nobody was showing up to their home stadium anyway, so it doesn't matter to them, I guess, that they're always in front of away fans. It's going to be interesting. The Chargers are training in high elevation out in Denver to get ready for this game, and the Chiefs elected or not, they stayed in Kansas City. Does that play a factor into this game? Do you think the preparation at the higher altitudes is going to help give the Chargers an edge, even in a short week like this? I'm not so sure. I just don't see the Chargers having the defensive muscle to keep up with the Chiefs. I know the Chiefs have lost some close games here, but if you look at the way they lost to Baltimore, who really got up for that game, and they played physical, and they pounded the rock, and the defense played a lot better. They lost to the Titans, and it took some help for that to happen, and the Titans' defense kind of limited them at times. I just don't see this Chargers team slowing them down. I think they can answer back with these running backs. I think Melvin Gordon's going to have a great game. I think we're going to see Austin Eckler have a great game here. I'm saying start both those guys if you have them in fantasy, but is Phillip Rivers going to be able to outshoot the Chiefs this far from home, on the road, in Mexico City? I'll go Chiefs. I'll go Chiefs here. I know Drew's doing the same. I think this is going to be one of those games that Kansas City gets back on the horse, wins this one. It won't be a blowout. I think this is going to be like 32-30. I think both teams score a lot. It probably comes down to the wire, and then Kansas City probably scores a last-second touchdown to be done with it. This has been a great matchup last year. I can't wait to see if the Chargers have what it takes to keep this matchup close, but I think with Derwin James out and Melvin Ingram still not on the field, I think he's still hurt. I don't think he's coming back for this one. We're going to be talking about the Chargers coming up short on defense against the Kansas City Chiefs. Ray, I appreciate the update. He says the game's still at 0-0. Question is, how long does that stick around there? If you're the Bears, this is like the perfect scenario. Get a good turnover and you're fine. Also, Lisa says Melvin Gordon looks like Chadwick Boseman's twin brother. Wakanda forever. Okay. Ray also says he's going to go with the Chargers for the upset. I don't blame you for that one. The Chiefs haven't looked like they have in last year, the past couple weeks, but I don't know, man. I'm going to go Chiefs. I got to go safe here. I think that's the safe pick. I don't blame you for picking the Chargers, Ray, but I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs. We'll see what happens, though. Guys, great show. I appreciate all of you sticking with me. Thank you again, especially with Sunday Night Football going on, for sticking with me this long. I know I rambled on a lot, and my throat is killing me, so I can't wait to go finish the rest of this beer, watch Sunday Night Football. As always, for Sports Around the Bar, thank you so much. I don't have any special thanks, but thank you if you commented. Thank you if you didn't, but thank you especially if you commented. The show's always better when I'm talking sports with you. So, for Sports Around the Bar, it was a lot of fun, guys. I will be back, and Drew will be too, on Tuesday to talk about all this primetime action, as well as whatever you want to talk about. It's your variety show on Tuesday, so if you've got some burning sports question that you want to get off your chest and you want to throw out there, that's the day to do it. 7:45 Eastern, 6:45 Central, as always. So for Sports Around the Bar, I'll see you on Tuesday, guys. Thanks for the great show.